Greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Hannah Hickam. I'm the executive assistant, and I'll be hosting today this operator training. And with that, I think let's just jump. Oh, first, we're going to be doing a Q&A from the January 5th training. So if you would like to raise your hand, you can do that by opening the participants box, which if you hover your mouse around, there will be a toolbar at the bottom of the screen, and you can click on that toolbar to access the chat feature. You can chat your questions in, or you can raise, oh, sorry, that was the chat feature. If you want to raise your hand in the participants box in the bottom right, there's 3 dots, click on that, and then you can raise your hand. And these are questions pertaining to last week's training. Let's try to stick with that and not ask random questions unrelated. So far, I don't have any, but I'll give folks a couple minutes. I know sometimes it takes a while to type in paragraphs. All right, I'm still seeing none on the chat, but I'll give folks just a few more minutes. All right, and it looks like we don't have any questions to kick off. So I guess we'll just go on straight into the presentation. Just give me one moment to bring that up. All right, John Noto, I have made you a host, so hopefully you should be able to unmute yourself. Do you want to check your sound real quick?
I just did unmute myself.
Perfect, I can hear you.
And you can hear me, wow. Yes. Well, we're off to a great start.
Indeed.
Hi, I'm John Noto. I'm the Oil and Gas Location Assessment Supervisor. This training is one of a few that we're going to have about Form 2A and some of the materials that we are preparing to for guidance on the 2A. And there are many more trainings to come. This one is basically an introduction to a checklist that we're preparing. That'll be in the under the instruction section of the Form 2A. The checklist is similar to one that many of you might be familiar with, that has been prepared for the Form 2s. We'll go through a few of the tabs today. The bulk of what we're going to discuss are some of them are the more basic tabs and the more basic entry fields, and different folks from my group will be presenting the different tabs. Want to just on a side note thank everyone for your patience as we are preparing things like this training, still processing forms and trying to respond to questions. And I know I have a few in my inbox that you guys, many of you might be waiting on. So we appreciate the cooperation, and we also really appreciate that folks are being responsive when we have questions on our end. So to start, next slide, please, Hannah. Or would you like me to share my screen?
No.
Which might be a challenge.
Yeah, no, it's better if I just have control over everything.
That I am with you. Okay. So we'll go through. Rebecca Treats is going to start with the first tab, which is one that hasn't had many changes, but we wanted to give everyone an overview of all the tabs that are going to be in the form, and these are just the first 7. Could you go over to the next slide? And as I said, we'll have a checklist with instructions, and that's basically the how do I get it right checklist, and a mock-up of the form will be in our resource section. So if you could go to the next one, we'll get ourselves synced. We're just going to go over the tabs that are highlighted in green. As you can see, this page shows all the tabs, and there are quite a few new ones, and we're going to have another presentation at the next session on many of those. So if you'd like to go to the next one, we can get Rebecca going.
And Rebecca, I believe I made you a host, so hopefully you should be able to unmute yourself. Just double check that though. Rebecca. Oh, well, I saw her on here, but sorry, folks. Just give us a minute here. Rebecca, could you raise your hand by going to the participants box and clicking on those little dots? I thought I saw you earlier, but I don't see you now. Yeah.
Okay, I see she's raised her hand.
Oh, there we go. Awesome. That's her.
That's been another challenge for us, the internet. And,
I had this myself. All right. I have asked to unmute, so hopefully you should be able to unmute, Rebecca.
All right. Is it working?
Yes, I can hear you. And I've also made you a co-host, and now you can do that yourself.
All right. Okay, if you go next slide, please. So I'm talking about the consultation and contact info. This is the first tab on the 2A. A lot of it is the same that as before. So new location, refile, amended location. I did highlight amended location. I know there's been some confusion in the past about if it was a pre 2A 2009 pre-construction to 2009, that if you're going to be amending a location, that to contact your OGLA and we can assign a location number for that, and then it will still be an amended location. Under this section, we have also added the oil and gas development plan, the OGDP, and the number that is number 5 and 6 there. If you do not have a number assigned yet, just leave it blank. The consultation area has changed a little bit. That is 7 through 12 as highlighted. The 7 and 8 is now the CAP instead of the CDP. Number 9 is the high priority habitat. This used to be like the RSO or the SWH for CPW consultation, and that information is now on the COGCC maps. So number 10 is the groundwater under direct influence, or type 3 water well. This can also be found on the COGCC maps. And this is, the consultation would be with the public water administrator for that area. So that's who you would be contacting. Number 11 is a variance request with CPW under the 1200 series if you're asking for a variance from any of the 1200 series rules. And number 12 is if there is any other variance requests on the 2A that requires a CDPHE consultation. So those are all the new consultation tabs or checkboxes. The contact information and the financial assurance is all pretty much the same. Next slide, please. So there's the consultation kind of just zoomed in that you can see how it's now the CAP instead of the CDP and the high priority habitat area, the GUDI or the type 3 well, and the other variance requests that require CPW or CDPHE consultation. Next slide. So this is kind of what the checklist looks like. So this is the amended location that we were just talking about, that if it's pre-2009 to contact your OGLA. Next slide, please. And here's the new area that can help you on the checklist to fill out the form if you have any questions. Is it the OGDP number and the high priority habitat and any of the consultations. And that's what's new on the first tab.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next up, we've got Surface and Materials with Stephen Schwartz. Stephen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. We'll check your sound and then we can get going.
Thank you, Hannah. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Stephen Schwartz. I'm going to be talking about the changes to the Surface and Minerals tab on the Form 2A. Next slide, please, Hannah. So this is what the Surface and Minerals tab will look like on the new revised 2A. You'll see that a lot of the fields are fairly similar to what was originally on the Form 2A. Fields 1 through 11, surface owner info, are largely unchanged, so I'm not going to go over those today. What I'm going to focus on are the changes we've made to how we're answering the question right to construct. Those are fields 12 through 16. And a new text box at the bottom for the lease description, field 21. Next slide, please, Hannah. So previously, to answer the question of right to construct, we had sort of two different sections. One was a drop-down, and another was a select all that apply list of checkboxes. These have been combined into these 4 checkboxes. And reference 12 talks about a really big change: check only one. You're going to carefully read the 4 different options, and you're going to select the single one that best represents what's giving you the right to construct on this given location. These are in descending order, so if the first option applies to you, check the box and you don't need to worry about the rest. If the first doesn't, but the second does, check the box for the second, and then continue on. Now I'm going to go through these briefly. They should seem fairly familiar for previous right to constructs. So reference 13, the operator applicant is the surface owner. If you own the surface which you are proposing the location, your surface ownership grants you the right to construct. Reference 14, the operator has a signed surface use agreement for this location attached to the SUA. If you have a signed SUA with the surface owner, you can simply check this box and attach that SUA. However, if you do check this box, that SUA must be attached. That is something that will cause the form to be returned to draft during the completeness review. Now, let's say you have the more traditional oil and gas lease granting the right to construct. That's this now been combined into this question 15. All operations in this oil and gas location will develop the minerals beneath the location, and the surface owner owns the minerals beneath this location and is committed to an oil and gas lease. Attach lease map or provide lease description. Now, it's really clear that all 3 of those all those ands have to be in place. So check the box only if the surface owner owns the minerals under the surface, and those minerals have been leased, and those minerals have been leased to the operator or applicant of the Form 2A. Now, one question that we often, that we anticipate we're going to get a lot is, we have an oil and gas lease that's granting us the right to construct, but we also have an SUA. Which one should we be using? Like I said before, these are in descending order. So if you don't own the surface, but you do have an SUA, check the SUA box, attach the SUA, and you don't need to worry about the next one. So in the final one, this is the surface owner bond as the right to construct. All operations in this oil and gas location will develop the minerals beneath the location, and the operator intends to use the surface bond per Rule 703 to secure access to the location, attach lease map, or provide lease description. Only check this box if you're looking to use a surface bond as your right to construct on the surface. And if you do, you must provide the surface owner protection financial assurance type, which is a dropdown, which is unchanged from the previous Form 2A, and provide the surface surety ID that is on file with our financial assurance folks here at COGCC. Next slide, please, Hannah.
Yeah, sorry, Stephen. Could you take your mic off and maybe hold it like this? I think it might be rubbing against something.
Oh,
and
I'm
causing
sorry.
some kind of. No, I'm sorry. I should have interrupted earlier. There just wasn't a good time. And there's your next slide. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now for those last two types of right to construct, oil and gas lease and a surface owner bond, there's an instruction that says provide a lease map or a lease description. And this is the text box that formerly was on the Form 2A that we're now having on the formerly on the Form 2, which is now on the Form 2A, where you can describe the lease that's being produced by the wells on this location. You were supposed to provide a single lease that will be developed. If the minerals beneath the surface location are leased, that is the lease we want you to describe. And if the description is in short, simple quarter language, simply type it into this text box. If it is more complex or larger or in meets and bounds language, you can simply say, see attached lease map, and then attach the lease map attachment to the 2A itself. And as the instruction says, fill this out if necessary. If you own the surface or you have an SUA with a surface owner, this is optional and you don't need to fill it out. And next slide, to turn it over to James Hicks to talk about the construction, drilling, and waste tab.
Hi, this is James Hicks. I will be presenting the construction, drilling, and waste as Stephen indicated. Next slide, please, Hannah. This is how the old Form 2A construction, drilling, and waste tab appeared. Next tab, Hannah. And this is how the new Form 2A construction, drilling, and waste tab will appear. You can see that there's relatively few changes. The primary one is that the date plan to commence construction and the estimated date that interim reclamation will begin have been removed. The rest of the form remains pretty much the same as it has before. So next page, Hannah. And probably one of the important things is to be sure to include areas of disturbance for construction, including the stormwater and erosion control measures. And under the construction part of the page, and operators are encouraged to minimize the surface area disturbed as much as possible as it was in the past. So those are really the key things on this one. And that concludes the tab for the construction, drilling, and waste. Next page. I'll turn it over to Melissa.
All right. Thanks, James. Melissa Halsey is up next with, PG, with land use and soils. Melissa, go ahead and check your mic real quick for me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and give you just a brief overview of some of the changes that we have to the land use and soils tab. So Hannah, next slide, please. So as you can see, much of it has stayed the same, but there are a few somewhat large changes that have been made to this slide. So we'll start with the first one, which is describe the relevant local government land use or zoning designation. That's the highlight under number 16. So basically, you can find the local government's land use or zoning designation under the local government's website, or you can contact, some of the smaller governments might not have that set up, but you can contact them and get the zoning or land use for your oil and gas location. Next after that is brand new. So we are asking to describe any applicable federal land use designation. So if your oil and gas location or any portion of the oil and gas location falls within an applicable federal land use designation, you'd need to fill out this box. So these may include federally designated critical habitat, or it may include conservation resource program lands. So we'd want you to go ahead and fill out this box and provide those designations. In addition to that, after providing the actual designation, we would provide any status that it may be. So when we talk about status, we may be looking at, so if you're on cropland and your oil and gas location, the cropland is under a conservation resource program contract at that time, but they unenroll the oil and gas location from the program, but they do plan to re-enroll once final reclamation of the oil and gas location is complete. We want that status. So it's unenrolled in the CRP program, but will be re-enrolled in the CRP program after final reclamation has been complete. So that's what we're looking at for federal land use designation. So next tab, please. So the difference on here, we're getting into the reference area information. So here, if final land use includes non-cropland, more specifically, if it's other, here under the highlight number 33, describe landowners designated final land use, that needs to be filled out if your future land use is checked as other. This box is going to be required. You can use this for additional information if need be, but if you check other for future land use, number 33 needs to be filled out. Next things that we're looking at is the reference area. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to just go through a few things about reference area that I'm reiterating that most of us already know. But just as a reminder, the reference area is used for final reclamation, and therefore it should have similar characteristics of the oil and gas location, specifically including plant community, topography and slope, aspect, and soils. There's probably one word on this slide that is new to many of you, and that is aspect. Aspect simply means the direction of the slope. So if you have a northerly sloping oil and gas location, when you're choosing your reference area, it's important to choose a reference area that also has a similar aspect, that is also northerly facing. That is going to be a component of sunlight, and that is going to help drive the plant community along with topography, slope, and soils. The next thing that I just want to remind everyone, reference areas should not include areas that have been previously disturbed by oil and gas activity, even if that location is in the final stages of final reclamation. Please choose a different reference area that has not been disturbed by oil and gas activity. So we'll go on to some of the more significant changes that we're going to see on the land use, plants, and soils tab. Next slide, please. Plant community. So plant community is just basically, it's the collection of plant species that are within the oil and gas location. So you're still going to choose this much the same way you chose it the last time, but the format is going to be different. Instead of a checkbox format, we're going to have a drop-down format. Now, the plant community is going to be important. Again, it's the collection of plant species located within the oil and gas location. But again, when you're choosing your reference area, you want to make sure that we've got the same plant community as the oil and gas location. So from there, you'll go to the drop down and you'll choose the correct plant community that best fits the area, whether it's disturbed grassland, forests, montane and montane riparian. We'll just choose the one that best fits that area. From there, we're going to go into probably the biggest change on the land use, plants, and soils tab, which is on the next slide. Thank you. Dominant vegetation. This also might be new to quite a few of you. So dominant vegetation, what is dominant vegetation? Basically, the dominant vegetation is going to be the vegetation species that primarily makes up your cover, your vegetative cover. A lot of times It will include more of the herbaceous species, more of the woody stock species. So, but it's going to dominate the cover of your oil and gas location and your reference area. It's going to dominate the vegetation cover of the reference area. So we want for you to provide the dominant vegetation species. So how to do that? The best way to provide that species, the dominant vegetation, is to conduct a vegetation assessment. A few things about vegetation assessment is they really do need to be completed at the proper time of the year, which ideally would be the growing season. Again, when we go back to herbaceous ground cover, we're talking a lot of grasses, things like that. And if you're not within the growing season or around the growing season, grasses are hard enough to speciate when they're flowering. When they're dormant, it's going to be very easy to get them wrong. So anywhere within that growing season or around that growing season, but really the main point is to be able to see the flowering vegetation so you can speciate it correctly. The next thing about vegetation, vegetative assessment, is it really should be quantitative and representative of the reference area. So the best way that we see doing this is on the next slide, thanks, is to do a transect, a vegetative transect. So here we just have a picture. That white line going through the center of the grassy area of the photo shows you a 100-foot vegetative transect. That is basically just a 100-foot chain that you draw across the area of assessment. And protocols may change. Generally speaking, what you'd want to do is walk 5 feet along that transect, look down, document the species, the vegetation species that are there, walk another 5 feet, stop, look down, document the species there, and just so on until you get to the end of that vegetative transect. And that will help you determine the dominant percent cover. So that's one protocol that we're on. So that's one protocol that we're looking at. Obviously, other protocols can be used, but they really do need to be a quantitative protocol. So if you do choose other protocols to do, just keep in mind that when we're doing our review of the assessment, we may ask for your methodologies and your protocols. From there, we can go to the next slide. And again, this is remaining really much the same, but this is your soils. And we just want to reiterate that when we're looking for soils, we're really looking for you to go to the NRCS map unit, map layer. You can go to the COGCC map where we have the map layer right on the COGCC map, or you can visit the NRCS website, which we have documented on the new Form 2A also. We want to specifically see all soils that will be disturbed by the working pad surface. So that does conclude. There may have been a question, Hannah, that came through.
Okay.
Let's take all the questions at the end, Melissa.
Perfect, we can do that. Okay.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, Melissa. Great job. And oh, let me get the next slide. There we go. Next up, we have Doug Andrews with equipment and flow lines. Doug, can we just test your mic real quick?
Good morning, Hannah. How am I sounding?
You sound great. Thanks so much. And I'll go ahead to the first slide for you. Oh, there you go.
Good morning, everyone. This is Doug Andrews, Oil and Gas Location Assessment Specialist for Northeastern Colorado. I'm going to be going over the Equipment and Flow Lines tab on the Form 2A. What you're seeing here on this first slide is a general mock-up of what that tab is going to look like. It's, for the most part, the same, but there are some minor changes to this tab, which I'm going to discuss. The top of the tab has the familiar site equipment checkboxes where you put down the number of each different type of equipment that you're going to have on site that that you're familiar with, tanks and wells and things like that. But we have added 4 new specific pieces of equipment to this numbered list here. It's the number 15 heater treaters, number 17 meter sales buildings, number 28 enclosed combustion devices, and number 29 vapor recovery towers. We have been seeing these 4 particular types of site equipment listed frequently in the other equipment, other facilities section on the 2A for a number of years. So we thought it was important to just add those to this upper part of this tab, so you can give us the count of that since they show up fairly frequently. Following that section, you'll see that we've changed the other facilities to now say other permanent equipment. The format is the same, where you give us the equipment type or name and then the number of it, but the distinction here is it's permanent equipment. So this is, a lot of times in the recent past, this is where you have been putting down ECDs or vapor recovery towers and things like that. And so if you don't see something listed in this part above where the site equipment box is above, but it's something, a piece of equipment that you intend to have on your location permanently for either the entire length of time of its operation, or you anticipate majority of it, you would list it here. You know, some examples of this may be different types of instrument skids that you have out on your location for long periods of time. So you would put those there and give us the number of that. Can you go to the next slide, please, Hannah? Below other permanent equipment, we've added other temporary equipment. So this is where we want to see the equipment that you intend to or anticipate having out there temporarily. Recently, and we've seen things of this that would be flowback tanks or produced water storage tanks that operators thought or anticipated they would have on their location for maybe the first 12 months of production, and then once the amount of produced water dropped off, they would then remove them. We want to know what temporary equipment you anticipate having out on your location and the number of them. And again, by temporary, we mean, you know, equipment that's going to be out there from flowback through the first approximately 12 months or so of production. That's not a hard number, that's just a ballpark. It's some equipment that you don't anticipate being on your location for years and years and years, maybe for a few months to maybe a year or maybe even 2. We just want to know that. That helps give our inspectors an idea of what to anticipate they'll see when they go out and do an inspection of the site. And then below that is the flow line description. That's unchanged. Can you go to the next slide, please, Hannah? So here is a little snippet from the checklist, and it's just showing the part where it has the permanent equipment type and the temporary equipment type, and some distinctions about, you know, how those differentiate. Please be sure that if you include any entries on the permanent equipment type and the temporary equipment type, they also need to show up on your location and layout drawings, just like the other equipment, you know, along with the wells and the tanks and the separators and things like that. So that is the primary change to the equipment and flow lines tab. Thank you. Next slide, Hannah.
All right, thanks, Doug. Great job. Next up, we've got John Noto with the submit, and go ahead and take it away, John.
All right, I'm back. The submit tab is one that one of the few forms that has no changes, but these text boxes are worth discussing in anyway, just mainly as a refresher and to emphasize and reinforce the value of this tab and how important it is to add information that's really going to be helpful for our review. One thing that about the tab, you know, that is kind of lost sometimes is that this is a certification, and by putting your name on it and your information, you really are certifying that the information that you put on the form is correct and complete. And COGCC staff is not going to change information on the form without your concurrence. As far as I'm talking about operator concurrence, and we'll make a comment on the form if we do change. The folks that put their name on the form should be a designated agent. If we go to the next slide, please. Just a few notes about the comment section. This section really, this box is really to explain some really key parts about why the form is submitted, especially if it's an amended form or refile form. We want to make sure that we understand what changes are being made to the location that would be associated with that amendment. For example, you're adding a well, you need an amended 2A. This might be one of the first things that a reviewer goes to if they see an amended box checked, to understand what's going on. Also, the status of the refile. Refile forms, just as a reminder, they need to comply with all rules that are in place at the time. And there are going to be, the refiles all need to be on the new forms. So there's going to be a lot more information associated with any new 2A that comes in. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure that at times the person that submits the form, you may be in a different position, may not be at the company anymore. We appreciate updates so that we know who to communicate with, and that is also true for the operator contact information. So that's all I have for the submit tab. I just as a side note, I can say that we anticipate the checklist and the mock-up will be available next Tuesday on our website, and we'll be working to make that happen, and we'll keep you updated when we have other material that is also going to be available. So now I believe we're ready for questions.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. So Hannah, if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and MC the questions, but I will
Sure.
still ask for your help. I appreciate that. And for everyone watching, I'm Greg Duranlo. I'm the environmental manager. I've been trying to capture all the questions as they've come in on the chat, and I appreciate you guys putting them in there. We will also get those posted up to our into our Q&A on the website. So we will get written answers to those as well. But I think we can start with the first question that came in, and I think it's for Stephen. What kind of lease map are you looking for, and what do you need on it? Oh, and yeah, Hannah, I guess you'll have to help us.
Stephen, you should be able
Unmuted.
to unmute yourself. Oh, I thought I made you a co-host, but I guess not everything works all the time. Okay, you should be able to mute yourself now. Thank you.
That's okay. I had a Zoom crash and had to come back in. So the answer to what kind of lease map are you looking for and what do you need on it? The existing Form 2 attachment guidance for the lease map covers.
Sorry, Stephen, the sound thing again.
Sorry. The existing Form 2 a lease map attachment guidance covers what we're looking for. We will be copying that over to the Form 2A attachment guidance prior to the 15th. So we're looking for the exact same requirements for that lease map as you've been providing for the Form 2, and we'll be providing for the updated Form 2.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. And the next question that we got in, I think John already addressed, but when will the entire checklist document be available on the website? And yes, we are targeting Tuesday, because on Tuesday we will be covering the additional tabs. The tabs we presented today are kind of the easier ones, if you will. And so we're going to be getting into some meatier ones on Tuesday, and then we will be able to put the checklist out after that. The next question was related to wildlife, and I'm going to kind of take this one. In addition to the checkbox, will there be a text box on the Form 2A that further clarifies the identification of an HPH location? And yes, We will continue to have the wildlife tab in which the operator will identify the specific HPH, the best management practices that they're applying to the location in HPH. It will also be covered in the Form 2B, which will have additional information about disturbance acreage. It is certainly possible for